What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with my dad, Jon Dalzell, for another episode of You Got Boston. I know in a couple of weeks I had one of these. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo, Dad, so maybe you want to – I don't know what kind of headphones you're using, but it's been a couple of weeks since we've done one of these, so just want to make sure that we get back on track and can chat with all of you, and happy to answer any questions about the team and about how things have gone over the last couple of weeks. The last time we did one of these episodes, it was about the Celtics' effort and about kind of the misconceptions around simply not trying hard. And since then, the Celtics have gone on to drop 2 more games, but they also had a 3-1 road trip. So I think that's been a little bit of an up and down stretch here. And so last night's game, I think everybody has a kind of similar feeling about it. It certainly it wasn't the most inspiring win, but still a win nonetheless. And we wanted to kind of talk through like why it looks like all of a sudden guys like Derek White, Drew Holiday just aren't playing the same way that they were last year. And I think that play was so important to their championship run. And then also just talk about this, if there's different combinations or lineups or players off the bench that could be tapped. And again, I'll just start off by, before we jump in, the Celtics are 28-11. So 3rd best record in the league. It was only 2 games worse than they were last season. So it's not like, I think there's a lot of, Joe Mazzulla said post-game yesterday, it feels like a Morgan here. Based on the questions that we were asking. I thought that was a good way to put it. So it's not like things are disastrous here, but I think most fans that are watching are not feeling like, oh, this team is the same kind of breezing by, blowing everybody out team that they remember from last year. So with that, I'll pass it over to my dad, who can share a little bit about maybe what you're thinking throughout kind of this most recent stretch.
Okay. First of all, promise me you'll have me back on the show when they start playing great again, because I feel like I'm here to explain why they're not playing well, or at least try to. But it is really interesting to watch, and I've been paying really particular attention now to what's happening and what transpires during the course of the games. And I think it's really fascinating what Joe said yesterday. I think he kind of caught everybody off guard with the morgue statement, and also the fact that he said, "I love it," like I'm like he's getting a kick out of this, and I think that he actually is, and I think that it may be hard to for a fan to understand that, but as a coach, I'm trying to get into his head, which is a pretty challenging place to get into, I think, but I think that the part that he's enjoying about it is that if they were riding high right now at this point in the season and everything was just flowing beautifully, I think that would be more of a challenging situation for him from his perspective than it is to watch them struggle right now. Because the struggles are going to come when you play 82 games. There's not a team in the history of basketball that just glides through, although last year it kind of looked like that. But I think that generally you're going to have some struggles, and they have certainly struggled. And I think that he's taking what he's learning from what's happening out there, and he's going to make adjustments and build upon that. And I think that it's also, I believe, in my opinion, it's building a character. It's going to have to build a character on that team that maybe he thought wasn't able to be built last year because they had the kind of, smooth sailing kind of, although they had some definite challenges, but it was a lot smoother sailing. So I think if the season had been identical to what transpired last year, he probably, from his perspective, would be a little bit disappointed with that, because that's not what he, I don't think he set this up on purpose. I don't think that he's wishing that they were shooting poorly like they are. But the fact that they are, and the fact that they are playing the way that they're playing right now, I think kind of falls right into his mindset, is that, we have to build another team, even though it's the same players. It's a different season. The teams that they're playing against are different. It's different lineups that they're facing than last year. And, maybe they didn't change, but the rest of the league did change. And last night was just another example. I watched the game really carefully. It was a New Orleans team that's really, not playing, throughout the season. They've been playing poorly. They've been losing, they got the worst record, I think, in the NBA on the road, or at least a poor record on the road. And yet, look at the players on the team. They got a bunch of really great players. So it's not like this is the NBA. This is not the Celtics playing against a high school team. This is the Celtics playing against a very talented team that just happens to not be playing well at all until last night. And last night, I think that the New Orleans played, they shot the ball extremely well. I think they shot like 46% or something from threes or something like that, or like a really exceptional shooting, and they were dangerous the whole night. I mean, the fact that the Celtics got away with a win, it was the one bounce at the end. But I think overall, I think he was satisfied that he got a win, and yet the struggles continue. So there's a lot to be learned and a lot to be taken from these games, and again, he's this attitude that he has about it, it's like it's perfect, like he's loving it, is really, really fascinating to me as a basketball fan, as a player who I believe that I have a good understanding of the game, and I've kind of been in all kinds of situations as a player. I think that if I were the Celtics right now and I had my coach talking and behaving the way that he does, I would appreciate that. I think it's a good way to go about it. He's not turning on his players. He's not bad mouthing anybody, which I know that he never does. But he's kind of embracing the whole thing. And I think that if the team follows that lead, that's the way to get out of it. They're in a slump. There's no question. They're shooting the ball really poorly.
Yeah, last 4 games, they have the worst 3-point shooting percentage in the entire NBA.
Yeah, and so it looks like that.
They're 2-2 in those games, but they have no team. Like, think about how there's teams that barely have shooters, and they have the worst percentage, 27% over the last 4 games.
Absolutely, and and the teams that they're playing against are coming into the Garden and raising their shooting percentages by 10% on any given night, not 3%. So I think everything is really, it's in a way it couldn't be worse, and yet they're 28-11. So that's not that bad. And at the end of the day, it's about winning, and that's it. You can talk about how they win, what kind of shooting percentage they have, what's happening on the court, all the other, all the words that are being thrown all over the place: effort, defense, shooting percentage, all this kind of thing. At the end of the day, they're 28-11. That's the only thing that counts. And I think that what he is, again, I don't know Joe Mazzulla, and hopefully one day I'll get to meet him. But from what I interpret from the way that he handles these press conferences and the kind of talk that he generally does, is that he's kind of buying into the whole thing, and he is planning, like kind of building upon what's happening out there. And I think if they were 11-28, this would not work. He wouldn't be able to talk the way that he's talking. But he's like, everybody cool, cool your jets. We're 28-11, and we're not playing good basketball right now. So if I were the league right now, I'm thinking, if I were an opposing team right now and I was thinking about the Celtics, they're not playing well. They're shooting poorly. Like you said, they're shooting with the worst percentage in the league the last 4 games or something from threes, and they're 28-11. What's going to happen when they turn it around? I wouldn't be getting all overconfident if I was playing for another NBA team that now the Celtics are done. I would be thinking kind of the way that I think he looks at it, is that we're kind of in a good position right now, because that the shooting's going to come back. I think that anybody that thinks that it's gone forever, that's ridiculous. These guys are great shooters, and it's going to come back. We talked about it the last time I was on your show, that it's confidence. And it's right now the confidence is absolutely not there. Guys are shooting a poor percentage, and I was doing some research so I would be prepared for your podcast, and I see that they're shooting less threes than they've been shooting. They cut down on shooting threes. Why is that? Because they're turning down shots.
Well, I think it's actually more that other teams are like scheming for them to take less threes also, because if you were going into the season and if you're a team that was a contender, like if you're Oklahoma City or Cleveland or any one of these teams, or even other teams, I think you look at what they did last year and they just took too many threes for anybody to be able to keep up with them. And so all this discourse around the league and whether it's too many threes, a lot of that is because of the fact that teams did the math and realized like they have to focus more on limiting opponents' threes. And the Celtics have had to deal with that. I think that there have been some games where they're being run off the line and forced to make kind of more uncomfortable decisions. Like Oklahoma City Thunder game, they scored 27 points in that second half, and he missed some good looks, but they also were forced off the 3-point line. And I think there were moments last year where you really have to go to a secondary option because teams were like doubling Tatum, driving to the basket and leaving Garrett White open for 3. I remember that was like the biggest mystery for me last year.
Right.
Like,
I mean, we talked about that. We
yeah,
said, why do they keep double teaming Tatum? Why do they
like
keep doing that?
let Brown, let Tatum, let anybody go to the basket and eliminate the threes. And it's like, I think they're doing it now. I actually felt like I was kind of gaslighting myself last year of this would be, if I was a coach, I would say eliminate the three and like double all, all this other stuff. And and now
basically,
I feel like
they were listening to your podcast, and that's why they turned the Celtics strategy around.
Yeah. So something else I wanted to talk to you about, and I think there's some comments / questions in the chat that we can respond to. But I think sometimes people get frustrated when Joe doesn't say like we played really not hard in this game, or like, Tatum was a disaster, or Jaylen was a disaster, because Ime Udoka, who I think a lot of the fans really connected with, he had that mindset, and he still does on the Rockets, of just calling people out. And then there's like guys like Michael Malone who have popularized this idea where if you criticize your star players after bad efforts, bad losses, like that's a positive thing. And obviously it worked when they won the championship. Everybody was saying, like, there was games in the finals where Michael Malone was calling out his team when they won that series. So for those of you that don't know, I think probably most of you do, but my dad played professional basketball overseas for like 16 years. So not quite the level of media scrutiny that, today's NBA stars deal with, but I think there's still this idea of like reading the paper and kind of hearing what your coach has to say. And Joe has a very clear, like, it would take something. I can't even imagine Joe ripping his players. It would take something insane. I actually don't even, I think even if something insane happened, he wouldn't do it. But what's your perspective on kind of why he doesn't do that, and if there's any drawbacks?
I mean, I can only look at it as a player, and I've also coached, that I've coached, but I mean, as a player is where my thinking is dominated, of course. And there's no players that appreciate a coach outing them in the press. I don't care. I'd like to see somebody go on a podcast or on an interview and say, yeah, I actually liked it when the coach outed me and told the rest of the world that I was playing poorly or I wasn't working hard or whatever. I don't see that as a thing. I think when a coach does that, they're clearly separating themselves from their own team, and they're prioritizing their own reputation, and they're basically looking out for themselves, which is, that it is what it is. And, being an NBA coach is, what did Mazzulla say? Is, I'm hired to be fired, right? He said that a couple of weeks ago or a week ago or something like that. I mean, these guys, they know that their existence is always in jeopardy. That's a fact. I mean, every NBA coach has been fired. Every NBA coach has been fired usually several times. And that doesn't mean that they're not good coaches. It means that when the going gets tough, the coach gets going. They're the first one to get to be on the chopping block, because that's the easiest thing to do. It's the most swift change that you can make. You can't change 5 players on your team, but you can change the coach. So everybody knows that. And I think that, that there's no way that a coach, or at least most coaches, predominantly most coaches, or they at one point it's survival, and I'm not blaming them. I'm not critiquing them right now, but I think Joe Mazzulla has a different outlook on the whole thing. Like, he continues to be just different, and he's not going to do that. I don't think he'll ever do that. I don't care. He could be, 1 in 29. And he's not going to be talking about his players. He's going to be talking about the game, and he's going to be talking about analytics, and he's going to be talking about maybe what he could be doing better, or what the coaching staff needs to do, or what the team in general needs to be doing. But he's not going to be talking about, specific players and kind of outing them. So it's not going to happen. And I think that if you want to, if you're looking for the way to get out of the way that, the Celtics are playing now, which is not good, they're just not playing well. That's part of the formula. If they're going to come out of it, and I know they will, I believe they will, and that's going to be a catalyst for them snapping out of it. Is that they're listening and they're watching, and they're aware of what he does, and whether he walks in the locker room and behaves differently, that's behind closed doors. And that's a family, that's family business, and that stays inside the locker room. And what he says outside that door, that's where he shows that he's still together with them. And I look at it as a player, and I would expect nothing less. And I've been kind of in both situations where a coach, I remember I lost a championship game one time, and by the time I got home, And it was like a Game 7 situation where we lost, and we were brokenhearted, and one of those things. We sat in the locker room for an hour, and actually the coach was gone after about 15 minutes, which we thought was kind of strange. And we just all sat around and talked and kind of mourned the fact that we didn't win the championship. And when I got home, I turned on the TV, and he was like on a talk show talking about how disappointed he was in us, and kind of outed the whole team on TV. And and that was the last time I ever had any respect for that guy. He didn't lose with us. As soon as we started to lose, he separated himself from us. And that's what coaches may do, because there's so much pressure on them, and the art of survival kind of falls in. But he's not going to do that. And I the more I see, and the more I listen to him, and the more I watch his behavior and everything else, the more I appreciate the guy. I really, really do. So he's doing what that's his DNA. It's not like, I don't think he had to try to decide that this is how he's going to be. That's how he is, and it's authentic. And I think if it wasn't authentic, it wouldn't work either. So I appreciate it. I think that the team, which is most important, it's not about what the fans think. It's not about what I think. It's not about what anybody. It's about what the players in the locker room think. When they walk in the locker room last night and they go, "Geez, I saw the game at the end when that shot didn't go in, when CJ McCollum missed that driving shot, which was not an easy one, but he missed it. There was just like, it almost looked like they lost the game anyway. It was like they were just like, this is ridiculous. Like, how did we get here? We had the ball with what was like 7 seconds left, and we had a 5-second violation. Tatum misses 2 free. I mean, the game was basically in their hands, and they almost gave it back, for a loss. So there was no thrill in that victory, but it's a win. But again, I think that the way that the language that he's speaking is the language that's going to bring them back to where they certainly belong. Time will tell.
I agree. And I'm just putting, just so everybody knows, I have these notebooks that I do after every game, where you can read kind of the tone and tenure of everything. So I just put an example in the chat. Just wanted a quick message from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action, with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, and Prize Picks is the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to a big payout, like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select players, projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Something about doing ad reads when you're also not feeling well is a lot harder.
That was a tough one. I'll do it for you.
That was a tough one. Yeah.
Just give me the script. I'll do it for you.
Okay. So, everybody in the NBA has been sick. So I assume that I got sick from just being around the NBA. It's been like kind of wild. Like, teams like the Mavericks, it's like there's almost like a plague going around. They told guys now, if you have any symptoms of a cold or anything, to just not even be around the team. So in any case, I'm sure, luckily I'm actually not going to be around the team for like 5 days now, so they don't have to worry about me. Wanted to talk a little bit about the perspective, because I know it's something that fans can get frustrated when Joe doesn't like rip the players. And I think that there's just a lack of understanding of like how different he is behind the scenes too. Like,
I'm confused by that. Why fans want him to rip the players? I don't get it.
There's 2 things.
Anybody explain that to me? I don't get it. If
you're in that camp, you can put it in the chat. But I have a feeling that there's not a huge overlap between that camp and people listening to this podcast. Maybe there is. So feel free to put that in there if you do want Mazzulla to rip the players and you don't feel satisfied. There's a couple of things that I was wondering. There's something I was thinking about yesterday, where like it feels like when the team is losing, fans want to see like everybody be mad because they're mad. So for example, like if you're a reporter, you're supposed, like I've gotten flack online for people saying like, why aren't you asking them why they played bad? Or like, why aren't you, like, you're letting them off the hook, where it's like, they're not like on trial. And my job is not to like hold, like I'm not there to hold them accountable. You know, like I'm just writing about what happened in the game. Obviously, if there's things that, if you think there's a reason for something that you want to uncover, like there's an issue in the locker room where there's a certain play or there's something that they're doing schematically that, like, for example, I think a couple, in 2023, when everybody on the team wanted Robert Williams to start and Derek White was starting and Robert Williams was coming off the bench and not being used a lot. I don't know if you remember this whole story, but
yeah,
Mazzulla finally played him and all the players were like, finally, and in that case, it's like, it is kind of the reporter's job to figure out the fact that like there was a lineup issue that everybody was kind of against and the coach took a while to catch up to it and everybody wanted Robert Williams to play more, right? So that's a very rare example though. Like when a guy struggles from the field, like I never understand why people want reporters to be like, why are you shooting 2 for 20? Or like even telling them what to do. Like my job is not to tell Tatum to be a better player, right? It's not my responsibility, right? And then if anything, like that's even harder for the coach themselves. Like I would want the coach to never turn on them, but I think people feel frustrated and they say like, I'm frustrated watching this. And then I turn on the press conference and the reporters are acting like they played well. The coach is acting like they played well. And it kind of creates this like emotional disconnect.
Yeah.
So I don't really know, but that's something I see all the time. I mean, whenever I ask a question after a loss that's not like really negative, people always comment saying like, why didn't you ask Jaylen like why he kept dribbling off his foot? Like as though that's going to solve Jaylen's, you can ask Jaylen about like a very specific question if you actually want to know the answer to something, but just saying, hey, you missed your layups or whatever. Like I never understand why there's a desire for that. But yeah, feel free to let me know in the chat if you do have a reason that maybe I'm not considering. And it's good to see some familiar faces here. I'm going to try to go through some of these questions. Let me just see. There's been a lot of comments too. Yeah, I do think that this is referenced in the illness thing. I do think this illness, I don't know if like regular NBA fans know this, but it has really impacted the tenure of this NBA season. Like because guys have been getting sick and it's been spreading across teams, and there are teams whose record I think are genuinely worse because of this, like whatever illness this is, whatever flu or whatnot. Like Derek White was in Denver. That's his hometown. His whole family's there. He played in the University of Colorado. Colorado had like PR people that were all there to like record and interview him, and he could not leave his hotel room. Jokic said he almost died when he finally came back from that same illness. So there's something going on. It is kind of a weird situation. And then, yeah, there's always like, I think sometimes what people don't realize is when you propose like ridiculous things, like trading Derek White for Kuminga because he had a bad game. Like I work in journalism now. I get paid and I have a responsibility to make sure that people are clicking on my articles and clicking on my videos and things. I understand now when you write inflammatory things like this, people click on it. Like it's really unfortunate, but they really do. And so the best thing to do is if this kind of stuff pisses you off or you read this and you're like, this is such a stupid article or whatever, like don't click on it because then you're incentivizing them to keep doing it. And when I write like, everything is fine, like nobody clicks on it, right? But if you suggest one thing that pisses people off, like then it's a model.
What does that mean? I was hearing trade
probably on Twitter, but feel free to.
That's you hear it on Twitter, okay?
Yeah, it's rage bait. Yeah,
got it.
Wow. And yeah, and I totally agree with this. Like, I don't understand why people are so quick to panic. I mean, and maybe we'll take a few minutes to talk about Jaylen Brown because I think that he is somebody who's having a tough season from an efficiency standpoint. He's had some rough games. He had some rough moments. And I feel like people already forgot that he literally was there, won the conference finals MVP and the finals MVP like 6 months ago. And you would think that a guy who's been with the organization his entire career just won you a championship. You'd think that you'd have a little bit of like, I don't know, leeway or patience, but that's not really what I'm seeing. I'm curious because I'm a big fan of his game. I didn't even realize my Prize Picks got some extra ads here. So, sorry. This is good. Okay. So anyways, what do you think about Jaylen Brown's struggles? Like, what's your mindset? Like, what's your perspective on like why he has just not been able to string together the kinds of games we saw, like, for example, in the playoffs? And I have my own thought, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all part of the same problem. I don't think it's particularly individual. I think it's affecting him maybe more than others because of the fact that they're not shooting the ball well, and it ends up what I see when I see that he's not playing well, it just seems like he's forcing, and he also seems to be thinking a lot. When I see a player that is overthinking on the court, for me it's like, uh-oh, this is not going to go well, because basketball is not a game about pre-thinking what you're going to do. It's about your instincts kind of taking over and just allowing yourself to do the things that you know how to do, because you've been doing it your whole life, and you make the right decisions, not because you thought about making a decision, because you just made it, and when things aren't going well, that's when the overthinking comes in, and you see guys making decisions and making plays that you're like, wow, I would never expect him to do something like that, throwing strange passes, or trying to go, split a double team, when obviously that was not the smart move at that point. And I think that the fact that the Celtics are struggling right now, I think that someone like him is probably the one that it affects a lot, even more than others. And that's what I see. But I mean, again, do I think that he's going to snap out of it? I think what's going to happen is going to be a collective. It's not going to be all of a sudden Jaylen Brown is playing great, and everybody else is doing the same thing that they're doing now. You're going to see this whole team kind of rise together, and suddenly, when everything is starting to fall into place, you're going to see him go back to playing the kind of ball that he was playing, dominant basketball that he was playing last season, and everyone else is going to rise up with it. I mean, that's the way that's the way it goes. It's not one guy, just individual. This is a team sport. Everyone is affected by everybody else. And right now, you're seeing what happens when guys are not hitting shots and not shooting the ball well. It starts to be contagious. Guys are overthinking. Guys are turning down shots that they should immediately just take, and then taking a shot that probably was not the best that they had on an offensive set. And you're wondering, why did they turn down a good shot and settle for a bad shot? And it's just because of a lot of overthinking, and because of the confidence is not there. It is what it is. But once it starts to happen, all of that's gonna evaporate, so to speak, on the court, and you'll see it happening. And what they need to do is not to do it not to get that feeling back for a half a game or 3 quarters. They need to get it back for a consecutive 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 games in a row, and then the rest of it's going to be in the rearview mirror. The struggles will be behind them, and they'll get back to playing the kind of basketball that I think we all are, kind of waiting for, and they're certainly waiting for.
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing I was going to add, and I saw some people were already calling me out on this in the chat, and I agree, is I think there's a little bit of a overemphasis when he makes mistakes, because when he makes a mistake, like when he loses the ball, it just looks worse than when somebody else loses the ball. There's like, whether it's the look on his face, or whether it's because it looks like a turnover that was like so obvious that was going to happen. Like sometimes when he turns the ball over, I feel like there's like, it almost is like everybody gets so frustrated, and then you look at the box score and it's like, okay, he has 1 turnover in this game. Like that was literally 1 play.
Yeah.
Or he makes a drive. Like I think sometimes he's just one of those players. And I feel the same way, like when Pritchard gets scored on, it's like, oh, he can't be out there. And it's like everybody gets scored on. It's basketball, right? But because it's the thing that you're kind of known for, like Pritchard's known for being like the small guy that can be a mismatch defensively. Jaylen's known for some of those games where he's had a lot of turnovers in the past.
Correct.
And so people look for those mistakes, and then as soon as they happen, I think it gets a little bit overdone.
They go back to their fears of what used to be,
This is actually, I think this might surprise people. In his last 10 games, Jaylen Brown is shooting 50.7% from the field, 33% from 3, and he's averaging 2.9 turnovers a game.
What about his assists? He had 8 assists last night.
And 4.9 assists.
Okay.
Which this is his best season as far as playmaking goes. This has been the season. So I think that people are looking for the negative a little bit, and he would be the first to say that he hasn't had a great shooting season. Like if you look at his efficiency numbers, they're not great. But what I can say is that covering him last year and this year, and I didn't cover him earlier in his career, and I think that there's a lot of, that would have been a whole different experience. But last season, after he had bad games or they had bad losses, he was so frustrated. He would always say something like, "This is unacceptable." Yep. He made some kind of like veiled comments sometimes about like not being happy with like his shot attempts or like whatever it is. And so now he can literally have a 10-point game where he took 7 shots and the Celtics lose by 20, and he has been like, everything's gonna be fine. We all trust each other. Like, he has this cool and calm about him that I don't know if people realize, but like, to me, that's the biggest point of growth that you could possibly hope for, is that he's not worried about it. And again, like, I think shooting struggles, people think like, oh, it's been 30 games, it's been 40 games. Like, in reality, it's been a couple months, and this is a guy that's been in the NBA for years. And if you look at guys' career logs, like, people have a whole season where they're down, and the next year they could bounce back. And Jason Tatum couldn't make a 3 between May and August, and now nobody's worried about his shooting anymore. So I think it's just like
one thing about Jaylen Brown is, when I think this is true, at least from what my perspective is that sometimes when he misses very badly. And a miss is a miss. You can have a shot go in and out and roll around the rim and fall off, or you can miss a 3-point shot by 4 feet to the right. And sometimes his shots actually go 4 feet to the right, and you're wondering, like, what last night he had one where he missed a kind of a wide open shot. I don't know if you remember it. But
I thought he got fouled on one in the corner as he fell into the Celtics bench.
One,
but he airballs shots all the time.
I think he was pretty wide open, because I happened to be watching, and he was like waiting for the ball. He had his hands like ready, like, if I get this, I'm shooting it. And he got it, and he shot it, and he missed like badly. Yeah. But I mean, that's a miss. That's not. It doesn't. You don't get deductions on how far you miss by. But I think the crowd and the media, they're like, what was that? And it kind of reverberates, and it kind of stays with you longer than if somebody misses a shot and it looks like it's going in, but it doesn't go in. But it is what it is, and I don't think that it affects him not nearly as much as it affects everybody that's watching. But again, last night, even though he didn't have a great game by any means, I thought he threw some great passes. He threw some really outstanding passes, which is something that he wasn't doing a couple of years ago. He didn't, he'd go through a whole game and have 1 assist, sometimes. And now he's looking for passes. Sometimes he overdoes it almost, but it's a different mindset where you can tell he's trying to bring the team together and all that. So I mean, I'm an eternal optimist.
Well, I'm too. I mean, I think that's what people.
So I don't see the good in and I think that, like, I'll follow Mazzulla. I think he sees the good even in the bad, even when things are not going on. He sees something in there that's of value, and he's going to try to extract that and use it, in the future.
And I think, honestly, like, when you just won the championship and you're 28-11, like, that is actually the unbiased lens. Like, a lot of people thought last year that I was really biased towards covering the Celtics, and was like, everybody kind of joked around that I was like a cheerleader. And the whole time I was like, I'm covering a historically great team. I mean, they had like a top net rating. They had the best offense in NBA history, and they won the Eastern Conference by so many games that it was like they weren't even playing their starters. It's starting in March. And so I think covering that team negatively is actually more biased than covering that team positively, because that's just kind of the reality of like what the situation in the team actually is.
So I mean, that's just a reflection on the media, don't you think?
I think it's honestly
negative. It's always got to be something.
It's a reflection on the media, but I will say, now that I'm in this space and I have access to views and clicks and things, it's what people click on. It really is. We get more people watch the Garden Report after losses than after wins. I can never understand that. After losses, if I was a Celtics fan and I was watching a game, I wouldn't want to hear people talk more about the team after they lose. I would rather do something else, but you would think, but people, I think that whether it's a community thing or a venting thing, like, it's great. I love doing the post-game shows after losses, and it's great that people tune in for those. But there is something to be said, like the Patriots right now, everybody's obsessed with reading about the Patriots. There's, the chaos and the firings and all that. Like, that's what drives the media. The Patriots views right now are insane. And the Celtics, that was not what I was saying, and you cannot show my losses. now our viewership is going to crash after losses. But
that's good.
I do think, like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, after wins we're happy. After losses we need you to cheer us up. I can see that. I mean, we have a positive show too. I think, like, we joke around and stuff, but I do think there's something to be said about, like, the negativity thing is like a self-fulfilling cycle as well. But that's why I feel like finding, like, the positive stories, and the guys, like, I don't know, people thought that it was crazy that, I was covering Jordan Walsh in like a positive lens earlier this season. Meanwhile, like, he was playing good minutes and he was doing good things, and he was, like, being fine. And I think you can always look at, like, the things he's not doing.
I mean, the thing that's fascinating to me is that this is entertainment, right? This is what NBA basketball is. It's a show. It's for people to enjoy, and if why not try to enjoy it no matter what's going on, at least, try to get the most joy out of it. And instead it seems like that's not really the trend. Is like people are looking for the misery in it sometimes, and I don't really get it, because there's a lot of joy out there. There's a lot to enjoy. So,
and I think the national media is already learning that there's some stuff that needs to change there. Like right now, I'm seeing like ESPN, all of a sudden they're like the Cavs, Thunders, the future. Everybody has to watch. Literally 3 weeks ago, they weren't talking about them. And I think they must have had some meeting of like, we have to start elevating these teams that are like great teams. They're fun to watch. They have great fan bases, and they're maybe going to win the next couple championships. So you have to start covering them positively. Like eventually I do think it catches up. Just a quick break to thank our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the #1 app I use to buy tickets to all events. My best friend was out with me in Denver. She used Game Time to buy tickets to the Nuggets game. Not much of a basketball fan, but she figured why not? And it was a really good deal. If you look, especially not in Boston, you can get really cheap tickets to Celtics games. Pretty much you probably could get on a flight and go somewhere and it would be cheaper. So all you have to do is pick an upcoming game. You can browse through tickets, and we have Game Time picks, so curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater. There's all-in pricing, so there's not going to be like a surprise fee at the end. Your price is going to be your price. There's a lowest price guarantee, and the best part is seat view, so you can get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. So you're going to be able to see. I hate sitting behind the basket. I'd rather sit anywhere else. So you can see exactly what the angle and the view is going to be from that. So all you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, to create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And I do use Game Time a lot. It's the best app for ticketing. So we'll wrap up here in a couple of minutes. I think there was something that people were asking. These responses are cracking me up about whether people show up to the Garden Report. I am a sick individual. I would show up either way.
Good show. I love it.
Yeah. No, I find it very entertaining as well. It's so really I'm glad that. But I do think that there is. It is just an interesting concept and everything. But one thing I wanted to just talk about is guys that currently aren't playing, because I know that that's something that people are always curious about. Like Keita has pretty much been out of the rotation these last few games. We haven't seen Tillman in months. Jordan Walsh hasn't been played. So curious, like people I think are frustrated, especially in games like the Sacramento game where, what's his name? Sabonis broke his own career rebounding record, 28 rebounds, and people are being like, Keita's sitting there on the bench. Like, why not give him a try? What's your take on that? And I always find this stuff difficult because we also don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So we don't know if like maybe he's been terrible in practice or whatever, but like, what's your take on some of the guys that aren't being utilized? Because we're not seeing them dig deep right now. This most recent stretch, they're really sticking with kind of the core guys.
Yeah. I don't know. I can give you a theory, but I have no idea if this is actually what his thinking is. But I think that maybe because they're struggling, that the only way out of it is to be on the court. And I think that the guys that are struggling, they need to be out there as much as possible, and to start rotating other players in and taking guys out. It may help at that moment. It may help that particular game. Like the game that you're talking about with Sabonis grabbing the record number of rebounds, maybe would have helped Keita to come in, possibly. But maybe he's thinking, and this is just me, trying to analyze. Maybe he's thinking that I got to leave these guys out there and kind of let them fend for themselves and get them out of this hole that they are kind of a little bit digging. And I think that maybe it hasn't worked entirely, but maybe it's a gradual thing that again, if you're struggling as a shooter and the coach takes you out of the game, you're good luck with that one. Yeah. The only way to get yourself out of a shooting slump or whatever is to be out on the court and keep shooting. And once you start seeing that ball go in, then suddenly everything changes. That's the one thing that I can relate to, because I was a 3-point shooter. 85% of my shots were 3-point shots, and I went through slumps multiple times during my career. And if I was sitting on the bench, I would have been in a slump the rest of my life. But the fact that I played at different times, and I played for coaches that said, you stop shooting, and that's the one thing I remember is that coaches told me when I was shooting poorly, you stop shooting, you're definitely coming out, because then you've lost your value. So it's something like that, maybe, that they're keeping guys in there to let them fight through this kind of struggle that they're in.
I will say, just to be fair, I felt like in Oklahoma City, kind of the reverse happened, where Pritchard was struggling in that matchup, and he got benched and played 11 minutes in that game. And I thought to myself, I very rarely, this is not a topic that I love talking about, because I think we only have a small piece of the pie to be able to analyze. But I do think there are times where some of those marginal guys are almost given up on pretty quick, because it's we don't want to dig deeper in a hole here, but it's at a certain point, he's your 6th man of the year candidate. He's won you a lot of games. I would rather see him play a little bit through that. And then I think there's this example of he's given Hauser lots of opportunities in the past when he struggled with his threes. I think with Pritchard, sometimes it's the physicality of certain games or whatnot is what limits him. That what you said though doesn't really connect with the Queta point, because I think people want to see Queta because they think there's an element of physicality that he can bring, and they get frustrated when Luke plays a bunch of games in a row and Queta doesn't get the opportunity. And I do think Luke has been gaining more respect from the fan base in general, because people start to recognize things that he does really well. And I do think there's a little bit of a delayed, they probably should have recognized that a little while ago, but there's more respect for him. And I would say if he looked different and he ran different, people would view him completely different, because he does a lot of good things on the floor.
There's a lot of good things.
Yeah, but I would like to see Queta more, just because he is a long-term investment, but at the same time, he does make a lot of mistakes that I think Luke just doesn't make. And so it's a risk reward. I think we will probably all agree that who has the potential to be the better player is Queta, but who has the potential to be the really worst player on a given night is probably Queta too. He has a big, Luke is kind of what you're going to get for the most part.
True.
So maybe it's a risk thing. I would love to see more. I'm sure he'll get his stretches. People forget, sometimes it feels this guy hasn't played in months, but it's been 2 weeks, and he'll get his moments in certain matchups and road trips and things. And I do think this is true. I think that Luke's been playing really well.
I saw Luke a couple of games ago. I'm not remember which time, but they were on a fast break, and they hit him running down the middle of the lane and he immediately kicked it out to the wing. He already knew where everybody was when the ball was on his way, and he caught it, and immediately, without even basically looking through it to the corner, I think to Pritchard or to Tatum or whoever was in the corner, and he made the shot. And I was thinking, you don't see too many 7-footers that run the floor and can make that pass so instinctively. So, and there's a lot that he can provide the team. He's not. There's a reason that he's out on the court. He's a very knowledgeable, very skilled player. There's some things that he lacks, but overall he's a really good basketball player. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, well, we're gonna wrap up here. I think one of the questions that a couple people asked is about the trade deadline. From what I've heard, what I've gathered, there is going to be some marginal move. I would be pretty surprised if they went to the trade deadline and nothing happened, but I also don't think that anybody that they acquire is going to be a major factor in a championship run. Last year you got Tillman and Springer, and Tillman hit that 3 and had some good finals minutes, but ultimately I would be surprised if anything bigger than that is going to happen. So we'll see if it does. There's a couple weeks here before the trade deadline. I know everybody's talking about a backup wing. Lonnie Walker is playing in Lithuania and is looking really good over there, and I know that multiple teams are in conversations or have been keeping their eye out on him. So we'll see. Bobby's gonna like that clip. Bobby's a big Luke enthusiast. I'm sure you've gathered that from the show.
Papa Dalzell is a great player.
What do you say?
Papa Dalzell, Luke's a great player. What, is someone making fun of me, or is that nice?
No, I think that well, it's just someone said Bobby's going to clip that, because Bobby's been advocating for Luke for years.
Oh, okay,
when he first signed with the Celtics, when he was literally with the main Celtics and everything, Bobby was this guy's going to be great, and everybody thought he was crazy, and so he loves Luke. So okay, we're gonna wrap it up here. We'll try to do this at least weekly, and so we'll do another Q&A probably this time next week. But if in the meantime you have questions, things you want us to address, we can save that for the next show. So thank you all so much for joining. Appreciate it. We'll be back on Wednesday with the post-game Garden Report, win or loss. And I can't see any people not tuning in because it was a loss, but I think they'll win. They're playing the Raptors.
I'll be tuning in
on the road. So you can tune into that. We'll have other coverage in the next couple of days as well. And I know Bobby right now is at an event with Xavier Tillman. So there'll be a video on CLNS, I'm pretty sure, shortly, where Xavier Tillman will talk about kind of what he's been up to. So I'm curious to see because he hasn't played in a while. So, okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.